Today for Family History Club, we're going to be talking about maps. And I love this topic because maps have some really neat information, especially related to what we can use for genealogy purposes. And as always, just wanted to mention that if you're interested, we have lots of virtual events and you can check our website or sign up for our e-newsletter to stay in the know about everything happening at the library. And if you haven't been to Family History Club before, we did used to meet in person. Now we've been doing, since the pandemic, we have been meeting virtually every other month. And basically each time we meet, I try to share a genealogy resource with everyone or talk about a topic, and love getting feedback on what you all would like to learn about or any kind of resources you'd like to kind of just explore more. And so we kind of talk about topics each time we meet. And then since this is virtual, if you do have questions, feel free to just type those in the chat box. And if you wouldn't mind during the presentation, if everyone can just mute their audio so we don't get any feedback, that's really helpful. But definitely feel free to put some comments or questions in the chat box, and we'll have time at the end to answer those. And then we've also put a link to the class handout into the chat as well. So let us introduce ourselves. I'm Shanna, and I'm the South Carolina Room Supervisor here at the Greenville County Library System. And we also have Rachel here today, and she is the Adult Outreach and Event Coordinator here at the library, and she'll be helping kind of moderate our chat and helping me keep track of all the questions and everything. All right, we're going to just dive right in. So for some class goals today, we have an hour and we have a lot that we could cover when we're talking about maps. So what I'm going to try to do is just give a few examples of different types of maps, because it would be way more a lot longer class with multiple sessions to try to cover the amount of different types of maps that are out there. So we're going to focus on a few different kinds, and specifically I'm going to mention a lot of Greenville maps. And then we're also going to kind of talk a little bit about how that maps can be used for genealogical resources and research, and how they can be helpful with that. And a big part of our class today is I'm going to demonstrate some of the map tools online and show you how you can access those and use those for free from home. And then also providing a list of additional links and resources. So that goes in your handout, which is in the chat. And that'll help you with some of the maps that we maybe don't get to, or some of the links we don't have a chance to cover because of time, that you can explore those later on that link in the handout. Okay, so let's first start about why talk about maps and why are they useful for genealogy research. And it's kind of obvious, this first one, but really thinking about maps help you locate where your ancestors lived. And if you were at our county records session a couple months ago, I talked about how, because land boundaries changed over time, it's very important to kind of establish during the time period when you're researching your ancestors to make sure that where they actually lived. And the upstate of South Carolina is a great example of counties changing over time. Like, for example, Pendleton District and Anderson and Pickens counties are some good examples of how you might want to look in all three places to make sure where your ancestors were living, or looking at maps to kind of see those boundary changes and finding out where they lived during the time frame when they lived. But we also use maps to really kind of look at the changes to streets, the environment, buildings, like I said, land boundaries. That can be very helpful. Maps can sometimes show property boundaries too. And so property boundaries might lead you to look for property records or tax and probate records. So maps can also be used to help discover other types of records, or can be used in conjunction with different types of records. one type of record that frequently gets used with maps when we have researchers coming to the South Carolina room is a lot of people like to use our city directories and kind of maybe they're tracking a certain address or a certain property over time, and then use our maps to also visually kind of see where that was. So that's how you can kind of use those together. And then maps can also help you learn really about the physical landscape where your ancestors lived. They can help you create kind of a narrative of your ancestors' life. Some maps may even show battlefields for military, kind of giving you background on military experience of your ancestor. Some maps obviously have, different scales and measuring distance, and you can kind of figure out the distance between places, even like historic places or things that even names have changed, you could still kind of figure out distance between places referenced in records. So they can really be a very wide range of what you can use maps for when you're doing your genealogy research. So I do want to talk a little bit about a few specific examples. I chose these examples because these are ones we do frequently use in the South Carolina room, and they are also ones that we have a lot. Some of these are readily available online for free, and ones that we also have in our collection that you can view in person too. So that's some of the reasons why I chose some of these and kind of narrowed down what I wanted to show. And this first one, honestly, I've told people this before, but it's Sanborn maps, and Sanborn maps are probably we have two large volumes in the South Carolina room, and if I had to choose, which is very hard to just choose one thing, but I would probably pick those as my favorite item in our collection, just because they are so neat. If you'd like to put in the chat, how many of you have actually heard of Sanborn maps or used them before? I'd be curious to know. And I did want to give just a little bit of background though about the Sanborn maps. So Sanborn maps are also referred to just as Sanborn fire insurance maps because they are fire insurance maps, and they really do document kind of the built environment and buildings, houses, things like that. But I did want to also give some background on it too. And also just to note, I was a historic preservation student. So we use Sanborn maps all the time in school to kind of for preservation and seeing how a building has changed over time, and really looking at all the details from the different Sanborn maps. So they're so neat. So, but just a little bit of background about the maps. In 1666 in London, kind of just give a little bit of history of how they came about. In 1666 in London, there was a fire that destroyed close to 400 acres of homes. And obviously that was devastating. But after that, this is kind of when the insuring of buildings really started to kind of being practiced. And so, but there weren't any maps like what I'm showing. Like this is an example on here is one from our collection of what a Sanborn map looks like. But in 1728, there was a London-based company called Sun Company, and they actually wrote an insurance policy covering a firm in Boston. So after kind of that started, you started seeing actually more English companies insuring risks in America. But as you can imagine, when you're insuring something thousands of miles away, it's actually quite the challenge, and also a bit of a gamble because the companies were not always able to go in person and actually personally inspect the buildings that they were insuring. So that did create some potential issues. So that kind of leads us to this next slide here. And this is it's actually believed to be one of the first fire insurance maps. So let me tell you a little bit about this map. Basically, after the Treaty of Paris in 1783, another London-based company called Phoenix Assurance Company, they commissioned a man named Edmund Petrie to create a fire insurance map for Charleston, South Carolina. And the map that you see here is a map that was based on Petrie's 1788 survey of Charleston, and this was actually published in 1790. And like I said, it's believed to be the oldest fire insurance map that's in existence. And this particular image comes from the Library of Congress. This map here actually shows homes, it shows businesses, it shows public buildings in Charleston in 1788. But one thing that sets it apart from other maps is that it does indicate the locations of fire stations and public wells on the map. And it also differentiates between the types of building materials. It indicates whether buildings were made out of brick or whether they were made out of wood, which, as you can imagine, for insurers, they would want to know those types of things in regards to fire risk and things like that. So that was a very important map that we have and can see here of Charleston. But after the War of 1812, what happened was you started not having as many English companies insuring in America. So after the War of 1812, American insurers started to kind of fill this void and started to provide fire insurance coverage in the United States. But what happened was they felt like there wasn't as much of a need for these fire insurance maps because they thought, well, hey, we are local, we can actually go and we can insure these, we can inspect these places and buildings. We don't need to have a map because we can actually go to the buildings. So the fire insurance maps saw a bit of a decline. However, there was a big fire in 1835 in New York City, and it ended up costing insurers about $20 million. And many of these insurance companies actually had to close their doors after that because it was just such a devastating fire, and $20 million among those insurers. That's a lot of money lost. And this resulted in the formation of regional insurance companies. And so these companies covered beyond what was there in their own area because they were regional, which once again created another new demand for fire insurance maps. So this brings us to our next map, which is a map by William Paris. And this basically, to kind of give a background, is Paris kind of came into the scene here after there was another devastating fire in New York City in 1849. And George Hope, who was actually a secretary at the Jefferson Insurance Company, ended up working with William Paris, who was actually an English engineer. And they worked to create a map of New York City, which would provide an outline of each building and would also show the construction materials and use color-coded symbols. And so these color-coded symbols really became the foundation for later maps and fire insurance maps. And they kind of became the standard, which would be used for over a century. So Paris later had another partner named Brown. And so Paris and Brown actually published the first large-scale fire insurance maps. And they did this until 1889 when the Sanborn Company absorbed them. So that's how we get to kind of the Sanborn fire insurance maps. And so, like I said, the main thing to remember is these were created to help underwriters kind of consider their potential risk associated with properties. And it helped provide information that assisted insurers in setting rates and also managing liability. But they're used for today. They can be used for helping with environmental assessments. Like I mentioned, architectural renovation. You know, that's something I use as a historic preservation student. And we have a lot of corporate research, businesses coming in wanting to look at the map as well, but also for genealogy, because you can really see how a place has changed over time and you can look at individual property records and streets. So they're very, very interesting. Like I said, we do have two really large volumes in the South Carolina collection, volume 1 and 2. And then we also have a smaller one that's an even earlier edition. And we have a microfilm, which is basically kind of several different editions of the Sanborn maps. And later when we kind of do some demos, I can show you a few other places online that you can find these. So the next type of map I want to mention is topographical maps, sometimes just referred to as topo maps. And basically, this is an example from the USGS. It's of Greenville that we have here on our slide. But it's topo maps really showcase the physical features on the surface of the earth. A lot of times you can see these little kind of squiggly circle lines, and the closer they are together usually means that's a higher elevation. So I can kind of see Piney Mountain here. Looks like we can see that on the map kind of up towards the north here, has those lines closer together. So that's indicating a higher elevation, and the lines that are further apart are usually indicating a lower elevation. But they can feature all kinds of different land features such as mountains. They can feature rivers and waterways, but they may also include buildings, roads, railroads. Genealogists can really use topographical maps also even sometimes to locate churches, cemeteries, helping with boundaries as we talked about before. You can even try using these for studying connections between places, like I mentioned, like railroads and roads, but even trails sometimes can be on these maps. In a lot of cases, these maps may show property boundaries, which, like I mentioned, you may use that in conjunction with property records such as deeds or probate records. And sometimes these are great when you want to measure between different settlements. But they really help to describe the physical landscape. So we can really kind of ask ourselves, like, was the area that our ancestors lived in, was it forested? Was it mountainous, or was it more of a rural or urban place? So these maps can be helpful in that instance. And what kind of roads in and out were there? Were there a lot of railroads? And thinking about those and kind of building that narrative like we talked about. And this can also maybe even help us kind of think about where our ancestors were living and maybe what their occupation was. Like, were they farmers or coal miners? And looking at some of these maps can help give us clues. And then I also want to show another type of topographical map. This is more of this is a military map, but it's also also considered a topographical map. But this is a sketch of the Battle of Camden, South Carolina in 1780. So we can see, military maps and maps like this can show different battlefields, might shed light on military experiences. And this one is actually coming from the Library of Congress's collection. So this is just another type of example. Okay, and then the next map I want to talk about is a really big one. It's a cadastral map. And so what does that mean? Basically, on the right, we do have an example of one. These are descriptive maps. Like, this map is actually called a full descriptive sketch of Greenville County in 1882. It was by Paul Kaiser. So sometimes you may hear this map referred to as the Kaiser map. But this is a map of Greenville. And the neat thing about this one I really like, and I'm going to show you a little bit more later so we can zoom in. We'll actually go to the Library of Congress and look at this one a little bit more. But it actually, when you zoom in, you can see the names of people who lived in the area and kind of in the vicinity of where they lived. You can see the names of churches and schools and obviously, of course, rivers and things like that. So it's very, very descriptive, which is a great resource for genealogists. You can also see the old townships on here, and we'll kind of zoom in on those later. But we have Greenville, which is kind of in the middle, and then you can see all of the other townships. So that's helpful too. When you're looking at old records, they may reference a township. This is a great map to kind of figure out exactly kind of where they were talking about. And one thing that's great with these types of maps too, because a lot of times someone will find something on this map and they're like, well, where is that in present day? And one of the tips that you can try is to really find like a river or something like that, or even a mountain range sometimes too. But if you can find like a river or even a creek, sometimes, a lot of times those aren't really going to change. Like the Reedy River on this descriptive map is the same, flows the same way as it does now, basically. So if you can find that on the map, then you can kind of help pinpoint where you are in present day, because that can be a little bit of a struggle sometimes of trying to figure out exactly where something was. Okay, so we've got two more types of maps we'll talk about, and then we'll kind of do a little bit of a demo. But this next one is I want to talk about aerial maps. So this is another photo from the Library of Congress of an aerial map. And maps that basically aerial maps are featuring, usually a lot of times it's going to be photos, but sometimes the really old maps are hand drawn. So it's not just limited to photographs, but aerial maps are featuring views that are captured from a really great height or elevation, and they're looking down. They can be captured by airplanes, but nowadays drones can also be ways to capture these aerial images. Satellites, even hot air balloons have been used in the past, and even I'm sure still today as well. And sometimes even a person, if they're at a high enough elevation and can get a good shot looking down. So you're just kind of getting, sometimes people do refer to it as a bird's eye view, but you really are kind of just looking straight down at the land, and they're very neat as well. And we'll go through some examples of what you can find online. We actually have a pretty large collection of aerial maps in the South Carolina room. So if you're ever interested, we can help you with those, but there's a lot of neat online tools that we'll talk about too. And so the last type of map we're kind of going to talk about specifically are GIS maps. And what exactly does GIS mean? And GIS just simply stands for a Geographic Information System. And this is a system that analyzes and displays geographically referenced information. And it uses data that's attached to a specific unique location. So it's location-based information. A lot of times it's usually sometimes referred to as spatial data. So you may hear that term. But it really, like, to simplify things, GIS allows this data to just be visualized on a map. And there's so many neat GIS maps out there today. We're going to look at some in just a few minutes, but they really just have a wealth of information. They're so neat. It can show many different kinds of data on one map. You can see everything from streets, buildings to vegetation. And it enables people to really easily see, but also you can analyze and understand patterns and relationships and things like that using spatial analysis. I did like this from the Greenville City website because we are going to take a look at their GIS map. And they said that, GIS helps us visualize, question, analyze, and interpret data to understand relationships, patterns, and trends. And it benefits organizations of all sizes in almost every industry. And that the city of Greenville has actually been providing spatial data and analysis since 1983. We're actually one of the first cities in the country to implement GIS. And currently, the department maintains over 140 data layers for use by employees and citizens. And there's a lot of different types of maps that are available. So we're very, very lucky to have this type of maps for Greenville, and we'll go explore in just a minute. But before we go explore, I did want to mention one last thing about the importance of looking at map keys, because usually almost every map that you'll find will have, sometimes on the bottom, sometimes on the lower right corner, a little key or of symbols, lines, colors, etc. This one that I'm showing here is actually from our Sanborn map key. And this is going to obviously portray some very important information that's going to help you to understand the map. And sometimes it'll also include your scale, so you can see measuring distance and kind of get an idea of how close or how far things are. And like with this key, this is what I was talking about, how Sanborn was for, part of it was to show what buildings were constructed of. You can see all the different colors represent the different types of materials. And then you also have additional symbols that go along with those maps. So always try to familiarize yourself with the map key so that you can understand what the map is telling you instead of trying to guess what it's saying. Okay, so now we're going to kind of spend some time. I'm going to go to our handout here. I'm going to just, if you have that link, you can follow along with me. Let's see. The first one I want to do on here is under the Greenville County GIS map. So it's under those online resources. And I'm just going to click on that. We're going to be going there. Actually, let's do one more thing before we go there. Let me exit out of that. Let's actually try under where it says Greenville County Real Property Search. This is really neat, and I don't know if everyone knows about it. I want to just show you this really quickly, and this will actually link us to that GIS map. So I think it'll be good to show. Basically, this is a Greenville County property search here, and we can do this by name, address. If you know the map number, you can enter that in as well. I'm going to do the library just because that's an easy one to do here. You don't even have to enter the full address. I'm just going to do 25 Heritage Green. We click search, and you can see some information about the library here. One of the neatest things on this part, we will click on the view map to go to the GIS map in a minute, but we can also click on view the property card. And I'm just going to rotate it. They always need to be kind of rotated, but we can see the old property card for the library. And the neat thing about these old property cards is that they will also tell you under date of the record of ownership, they'll give the deed book and the page number. So we have that here as well. And then sometimes at the top, you'll sometimes also see a reference to a plat number. And you could actually use those. And if you took our county record class, you could actually go on the county's page and find those plats or even, the deeds. And if you haven't, that is on our YouTube channel, so you can learn more about how to do that. But the property cards were actually used to track transactions prior to 2003. So it really wasn't terribly long ago that they stopped using them. So most of them will have an old property card. If you have one that doesn't, it's probably a newer property after 2003. Okay, so I'm just going to close out of that. You can print these property cards, especially when you get into some of the really older ones. They're so neat to look at, but you can go up here and use this print icon to print, or you can do download and can download to your computer. But I'm going to exit out of that. And so we're back on this page we were on. Now I'm going to click on the GIS map. So you can get to this main page from your link on the handout, but if you want to try to search the real property records for Greenville, you can use the link on the handout for that. So let me just exit out this. By the way, I know I'm just talking about Greenville County, but there are many counties and cities that have GIS maps these days. I even looked to see my parents, both sides of the family, they're from a very small town in Virginia, and I checked and I actually found a GIS map for their hometown. So they're out there everywhere. And usually to find them, you can try Googling GIS map for whatever county that you're looking for, and you might be able to find some. So anyway, let's just go through a little bit. Like I mentioned kind of earlier when we were first getting started, when we were at the beginning of the class, I mentioned to a few people that we could spend the entire class on just this map, and we could not even get halfway through what the capabilities of this can do. So basically what you see first is we have this outline of the library property. And this is just like an aerial view of the library. But what I'm going to talk about is on this left-hand side, you can see kind of a snapshot. We have our tax map number up here. We have our address, of course. You can see it's in care of the Greenville County Library. You can see the date of the deed, but it actually links to the deed. If you click on this, I'm not going to do it right now, but if you click on any property that has this little blue link for a deed, it will actually take you to the deed record. So you can view the deed. And then here we actually do have the plat. So we could click on here and view the plat for the library. And then of course we have just some additional information as well as fair market value, all that good stuff. And then if we go up on the top here, you can even click on like property report, and it's going to open in another window, and it might take it a second or two to load. We'll give it a couple seconds. Here we go. So this is kind of just that snapshot that you see there. It's going to make it in a nice page over here, and you could click convert to PDF and you could save this. It also gives you a little bit more about the taxable market value and how much taxes were paid. We can see the deed book information down here again. And we can see if this was a house, how many bedrooms, bathrooms, all that good information. Sometimes the plat information will be here too. So that's kind of a neat thing to look at these property record pages. And then you also see there's another link to that property card we were talking about. You can see that here. You can look at ownership history. This is really neat when you kind of look at homes. You can see all the different owners, and so it's kind of just a nice, neat thing on the left here. But just to talk about kind of just the most basic features, but also probably the most used features. We actually use this a lot in the South Carolina room, and we have a lot of people come in and ask for information about property records in Greenville. And this is such a great resource. So I'm just going to kind of touch on the highlights here. At the top, you'll see where next to Greenville Maps, you'll see a little identify icon. If you click on that icon, you can actually then go and click on any property on the map, and then it will then in this left-hand panel show you the property information for that building. So this one I just clicked on is actually the Greenville Little Theater. And so then we could see the same information, just different building, and we can continue to kind of click around and see on the map. And you have tools where, you can actually zoom in and out. If I do this, I'm using my mouse. I know you can't see that, but I'm kind of just scrolling in and out. So I can just go in a little bit closer and out a little bit. You can also do a street view is kind of this next icon next to identify. If you do a street view, you just have to kind of click where you want the street view to be. And this works in conjunction with Google Maps. And then you can kind of take your mouse and you can see a street view of the library. And if you wanted to make it full screen, you can just click on this box. It'll show you the entire, it'll fill the entire screen. You can also see a Google map over here, but that's kind of neat as well. Community info, when we click on that, basically you kind of have to, once again, click on a section, and it will just give you all kinds of information about the community. So nearby schools, places of interest, all different kinds of stuff like that. And then map themes. We'll talk about maybe one of these just because there's so many, as you can see, that you can even look at like flood zones and all that. So let's try, since we talked about topographical maps, let's look at topography. And this is kind of an overlay. And you can see this is showing like different elevations. And to kind of understand what this is showing us, you may be thinking, well, hey, where's the map key here? Well, I'll show you. If you go up to maps, this is on the top left in the blue, there's a legend. If you click on legend, it will show you what like the symbols and the colors and things like that mean. So that can be helpful. If you change your map theme, this will change as well. So if you end up using a different theme, I think we were defaulting to the land records theme when we first loaded our map. So then you would want to make sure that you're checking, if you want to make sure you're checking the legend anytime you change, if you wanted to try a different theme, to check the legend again to see what all the symbols mean. And then we also have some other tools over here. This draw, you can actually put text on the map, or you can draw lines and shapes. Like, let's say I could really see this being helpful. Like if you were looking at an old neighborhood, maybe where your family lived, or maybe you're part of a neighborhood association and you're doing like research on your neighborhood. Maybe you would want to label things. So you can actually put text and type, like I typed library, and then we can have library be there. And I mean, I can make it much bigger, like I can do 24 points, and we can make this labeled library if we wanted to do that. And we could draw shapes and things like that too, if we wanted to kind of put our own notes on the map. And then you could actually print this. If we click on print at the top here, anything inside the yellow box is actually going to print. And then if we zoom out, it's going to continue to expand what we can print. You can actually print on larger size paper as well. You can give it a title, and then not only can you print, but you could either save it as a PDF or you could save it as a JPEG. So super neat map. And the last couple things I want to show, like I said, we could spend so much time just because there's so many different map themes and different aspects to this. But I wanted to show you the one other feature. So if we go over to maps, which is over on the left, we click on maps, you can actually choose what's called base maps. And this is super neat because it lets you actually overlay aerial photographs. So let's try 1997. And this can take a minute to load as well. We'll see if it'll do it because it's still trying. Okay, here we go. So this is an aerial view of the library, where the library wasn't here, of course, in 97. We were actually right down here, but in this place where the library currently is, you can see what used to be there for 97. And you can do this. I mean, this is a map for the entire county. So as I scroll out, you can see it. And of course, I have that other layer on, so it's still doing property as well. But you can see aerial images. So I thought that was a really cool thing to show with the base maps, just because we did talk about aerial photos, and you can see different years. But I thought that was super neat. And then last kind of thing to talk about here is I just want to talk about if you wanted to search for a different property. If you go to search, you can actually search by address if you wanted to do that. And you could just type in a new address and it'll take you straight to that property. But yes, there's so many more more things we could do here. I actually linked on the handout, there's an advanced users guide. So if you did want to really spend time digging in this, I mean, it's so neat. You could spend a lot of time looking at this map, but we're going to move on just because we don't have too much time left. And I want to make sure we talk about a few other maps. So I'm just going to close out of this, and then we're going to go to actually the city of Greenville. So we just went to the county GIS map for Greenville. On our handout, I'm going to go to city of Greenville now. And I want to show 3 of their GIS maps. So this is their main page. They have several cool maps, but I'm going to kind of just show some that are probably most helpful with genealogy. And the first one I'm going to show is the historical aerial image viewer. And this is super neat because it actually includes the Sanborn maps too. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually, instead of typing in an address like you could at the top, you could search by a specific address, but I'm going to kind of just go around maybe Falls Park area, like right here, or let's see, maybe, yeah, let's do Falls Park. Let's kind of in this area. All right, so what we can do is you'll see a slider at the top. I'm just going to start dragging the slider, and you can see that now I'm seeing the 1920 Sanborn map for that area. You'll notice that some of this is blank, and that's because not all of the areas on this map have Sanborn map. It's really kind of concentrated mostly to downtown for this that they have, but still super neat to see. And we can zoom in and you can see the details on the buildings, and you can see how the streets were laid out back then. So that's very neat. Then we can also keep using our slider And now we'll get into kind of some aerial imagery. I'll kind of zoom out. So this is from 1955. So this one, I know we looked at aerial photos a minute ago. This one actually goes back in time more than the county one as of right now. So we can actually see 1955. Once again, it's not always, sometimes it'll be a little bit out of the city limits, but a lot of this is going to be not really, because it is City of Greenville page, it's going to be specifically for the city. We can keep going. Now we're in 1965. And we can slide some more. We go to 1979. So we can just see how downtown is changing. 1989. Sometimes they won't be very clear depending on the year. Some are more clear than others. And we can do, this is 1997, which is, we have 97 is on the county page as well. 2011. 2019 and 2021. So this is just a really neat map as well with the city, and we can go back a little bit further than the county one because we can see those Sanborn maps I was talking about, and we can also see some older aerial imageries. And you do have a scale. We were talking about scale and things like that is at the bottom here, and you can actually change the scale if you wanted to. But I wanted to show you, I'm going to just click the back arrow so we can go to the city page and just show you a couple more. If you click on interactive maps, if you use this link, it'll take you to all of their maps here. And I wanted to show you, let's just do, so for time, we'll do one more. Let's do the Richland Cemetery, because there is a Richland Cemetery viewer. There's also a Springwood Cemetery viewer. Since genealogy, we'll also, you know, cemetery records are very important. So let's look at that. And like I said, sometimes it might take a minute or two to load, but we have the Richland Cemetery viewer here, and I can scroll with my mouse and go in, or I can click the plus sign to scroll in, and we can see the layout of the cemetery. If I click on a section, you'll see that it kind of actually gives me more of an aerial view. And these red dots indicate like a tombstone. So I can click on the tombstone and actually see who's buried there. And you can search by name. So if you specifically knew, if you wanted to check and see if someone was buried in a cemetery, you could search by name and try that. You could also search by date of death, and you can just kind of browse like I'm doing and just kind of go almost like a little virtual tour of the cemetery and what is on the headstone here. You can also create a printable report if you wanted to save information here. And you can do this as well, like I said, for Springwood. So that's two of the cities. They're owned by the city. The city maintains them, so they have these neat GIS maps. Okay, so the next one I want to show, I'm just going to kind of close out, but just to mention, there's so many cool ones here that, you know, maybe not for genealogy purposes, but I will mention some of my favorite one probably, aside from genealogy, is the public art tour. You can see every piece of art in the city. It's so neat. One time we actually had someone, we had an old photograph in our collection, and we were trying to identify the piece of art, and it was an abstract piece of art. We were able to use the public art tour to find it and have like all the information about it. So yes, even for local history, that can be helpful. But there's some really neat ones too. There's even one for the zoo. You can see the exhibits and the layouts and what animals are in there. So very neat. And next one we're going to do, as we're getting close to the end here, I want to show you the Library of Congress site, just because there's so many wonderful maps, and it's not, of course, just for Greenville. So if you have another locality that you're searching, you can try their site. What I have it under here is that Kaiser map I've linked to, which is on the Library of Congress. But if you use this link, you can actually go up to the top, and you can then click on maps, and you can search by a place. So if there's a certain state or county you want to look at, you can search, put maps, and then click And then search by the state or county, and then you could also find what maps are available from their site. But I wanted to show you how great this is, because I'm going to make this full screen and zoom in here, but we can see this 1882 map, and we zoom in. I mean, such great detail. It doesn't even get blurry. It's really neat. And so we can start seeing the names of people, like I mentioned, because this is a descriptive map. We can see about where they were living. We can see the Reedy River right here. This circle was the city limits at the time. Furman College is listed there. You can see other townships and things like that. So as we're going, towards the south, we have Austin Township, Gilder Creek, things that we might be able to find today and kind of help us place where things are. And we could also kind of, let's see, I think there is a scale. Yes. Sorry if I'm making you dizzy. But there is a scale here. So you could even kind of estimate the distance. Could help you even with where things are. And you can see the entire county. And we can zoom in on any part. You can then, if I'm gonna just kind of go out of full screen, you can download this map if you'd like. It's right underneath the image here. You go to download. You can choose whichever size you like. They even have the ability for you to do a TIFF file, which is a very, very large file, a high quality file if you wanted to do that. So they have just a lot of wonderful maps, several of Greenville County, and also just many, many more. Like if you keep scrolling down, they'll show you ones that are similar. So we have another old map of Greenville. We have some of Anderson County, and some other states as well. So Library of Congress is a great resource for maps. And we'll just kind of wrap up here. There's one other place I wanted to show you, and this is our, let's see, did I put it on here? If not, I'll add it, but I'm going to go to our library website, greenvillelibrary.org. And we're going to go to, under learning and research, go to visit historic images. And I don't know that I added that link on there, so I'll make sure to put that on the handout. But we have a few maps we are working on digitizing more. This is the library's collection. So we have a lot of maps physically, like in the collection, that you can come up and look at. But we also do have some maps that have been digitized, and we will work on doing more of those. But we do have some, if you just search by maps, and we even have some like architectural drawings too and things like that. But here's one that we have is a 1904 map of Greenville. It's another type of descriptive map, and you can zoom in and see places and things like that, and where people were living. So that's in our own collection. One last thing to kind of mention, let me get a link for this too. If you are on our webpage, greenvillelibrary.org, you can go to our Heritage Quest database. If you go from learning and research to research your family tree, if you go down to Heritage Quest, you can actually view some of the census maps are in this collection. So I'm going to just click on Census Map Guide, and you can click on any state. But let's say if we wanted to do South Carolina, you can actually see boundary changes and things like that for all of the census years. So we can see how things have changed over time. So that's kind of a neat resource too, that's available in one of our online databases, which you can view from home with your library card, or if you're in the library, you can use our computers and get to it as well. Okay, so let me switch back real quick to our slideshow, and we'll wrap up for today. As always, just wanted to mention stopping by the South Carolina room. Appointments are no longer required. We do recommend them if you would like for us to pull a few things and get things ready ahead of time. That's always a good idea to let us prepare for your visit. So if you're able to make an appointment, that's great. If you're just in the area, want to stop by, that's fine too. We do have online record requests that you can do for obituaries and marriage licenses, things like that. We also, in addition to maps, we have lots of photographs in our collection. I showed you a little bit of digital collection, but we also have photos in archive boxes that you can view, vertical files about different subjects, and family files. If you're researching a specific family name, we have those, and books about different families. So if you haven't had a chance yet, definitely feel free to pay us a visit. We'd love to see you and show you what we have in the room. Okay, so now we will get to our Q&A part of the session. And Rachel, do we have any questions?
Yes, we do. So the first question is, can you tag the city GIS maps like you can the county?
Can you tag them?
Yes, tag them.
Can we have like a little bit additional? I'm trying to figure out what they mean by tag.
Shauna, that was one of my questions. When you were on the county GIS system,
Yes.
you had pulled up where you could actually make a tag for a location, maybe a label, whatever.
Yes. Oh, yes. I know what you're talking about. Let me show everyone what we are talking about.
I didn't know whether you could do that with the city map or not.
We can see, I don't remember seeing it on the city as an option, but what we're talking about is, let me go real quick so we can show, because that is a neat feature.
Yes.
Actually, let's do it by address. Oop. Okay, we'll go back. We'll do the library. Screen. Okay. All right. So let me click on it. Identify. Yeah. Let's see where it was. Might have been tools. Because there is a way that you can create a mailing label and you can actually get, and you can do multiple ones as well. Let me see if I can find out where it went. Sometimes I feel like it just kind of pops up and you're like, hey, it's there. Let's see. I'll have to figure out where it went. But there is, maybe it's under community info. Trying to figure out how I found it. But yeah, there's a way for, you can actually create Avery labels. You can do mailing labels where you, even if you selected like multiple addresses, that you could actually add them to like a spreadsheet, and then you could actually print out multiple labels. I'm like, maybe that's where everybody figures out like how to get your address these days when you get like all the junk mail. I don't know. It might be. But where was that?
From the
I'll have to
genealogy
find it.
standpoint, it would be great to be able to, I used to live in the city, and it would be nice to label the old 40s address that we had and then go to the newer addresses and label them all.
And I know that it's in the advanced guide too. Let me see, label. Now you've got me curious because I know it's there because I saw it come up. But yes, that is a feature. Oh, here we go. This tells you how to do it. On this advanced guide, you can actually export them all to a spreadsheet as well. But yes, you go under, if you're in the details section, you click on mailing labels, you can choose the Avery style label, and you can create and download a PDF file of labels for selected records. So that's the county site. For the city, I'm not sure I've seen that on there. Not saying it's not there, but I mean, it might be, but I'm just not sure. I could look into it though. But yeah, that's a really cool feature.
Well, I think you kind of answered my question. If you can do it on the county site, That includes the city.
Yes, it does. So that's correct. So if you just type in the address, it's for the city and county, so you could just do it that way. I'm not sure though for just the city because it does look a little bit different.
Yeah.
If it's going, we did the historical aerial viewer. So it's not as concerned with the property record as much as it is just showing you aerial imagery. So I would probably, yeah, the county map is going to have everything. So that's probably the one to do if you wanted something in city limits too.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. You're welcome. All right. Do we have some other questions?
No, not yet.
Okay. If you have any questions as you go through the links, let me take a little bit of just a minute to just kind of show a few of the links that I listed to kind of talk about. The first one are some books. And this first one I listed is actually all about the Sanborn fire insurance maps. So if you want to know more, like I said, those are one of my favorite things. So maybe that's just me, but I think they're super interesting. So we actually have a book on those, and we have a few other books related to maps, and Mills Atlas is a big collection. We actually have a small book version of it as well as the bigger versions of the maps, so you can look at that. And then on these other links, we have the city of Greenville. I just linked those few that I showed you. And then this one, David Rumsey's historical maps collection, I'll click on it really quickly because I feel like anytime I attend a genealogy webinar about maps, this is always mentioned because it's just such a vast collection of maps. And it's for not even just the US. I mean, it's for the entire world maps, but you can also find ones for South Carolina. And there's just so many, and they're historical maps. So this is a really neat resource, and you can search up here at the top. You can search collection, and you can search by a place. So I did put that one on there because it's one of the big ones that's always mentioned. And going back, Family Search Wiki, we've talked about that a little bit with county records class that we did. But that can be helpful too, is if you go to Family Search and you search by a location, that it will give you a page with all different kinds of resources. And sometimes they'll include maps on there too. So you may want to try, especially if it's a different location outside of Greenville, that might be a good way to kind of get like a quick overview of what's available. Oh, I did put the digital collection. I was like, did I not put that on there? So here's a link to our digital collection, which I showed a couple of things from there. We did the real property search. That's what took us to the property card. Register of Deeds, I also linked that because you can see the plat records there as well as the deed records. And like I mentioned, if you want to view our YouTube, if you go to our YouTube channel and view our past sessions, we just did one on county records and we talked about using Register of Deeds. So you can see how to use that. And then this is the county GIS map. And this is the advanced users guide. So you can figure out how to do your labels if you wanted to print labels, but then so much more. There's so many things you can do with that map. And then there's also, I linked to Greenville County IMAP is another GIS map, and it's more for showing like resources. You could even find like, I think this one is one that you can do for libraries too. Where are all the libraries? Of course, that's very helpful to know. And this is the one from Library of Congress, Heritage Quest, that you can use with your library card. And then here's just a few other examples of maps that you can find online. Sanborn Fire Insurance Maps. There's actually other locations. This is from the University of South Carolina, so you can actually search by county and see what Sanborn maps have been digitized. So a lot of counties on here where you can view more of the Sanborn maps. And then there's another aerial map viewer. They don't have Greenville yet, but I do. I was down there a few years ago. They mentioned that they would like to do Greenville, digitize some aerial maps, but they haven't done it yet. But there's lots of neat aerial maps there. And then South Carolina Department of History is a great resource. And even the SC dot, I don't know if anybody's interested in that, but they had some cool GIS maps too, with the roadways and traffic and all that. Interesting. So let's see. Do we have any other questions?
We had a comment about using
Okay.
GeoNames database for historical research.
Ooh, I don't think I've used that one.
They say it's useful for searching for a place name.
Oh yeah, the USGS. Okay, yes. Yeah, the USGS site is very neat. I liked using theirs for the topo map viewer. It was really neat because you could see all kinds of historical topographical maps. So yeah, thanks, Tom. Okay. We don't have any other questions. I just want to take a minute to thank everyone for attending today. And also wanted to mention that you can register for the session next month on November 18th, which will be at 4 o'clock, which is virtual genealogy drop-in. So if you have some genealogy questions, you can come, and I think it'll be Ashley and Durham will be hosting that session. If you have more map questions or any kind of military questions too, Durham's really great with that, and Ashley has a wide range of knowledge. So definitely check out that session, and you can register online. And then also always mention just to follow us on our social media pages. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And of course, check out our YouTube channel for our past sessions, as well as additional local history and genealogy videos. And we'll be planning for next year. So if you have any ideas, feel free to add them to the chat, or you can always email us if you have an idea. You can even use Ask Librarian email that we have on the screen, or also scroominfo@greenvillelibrary.org will take you straight to our South Carolina room email, and we can add that in the chat too. But feel free to let us know if you have any ideas, or if there's any kind of types of programs you'd like to see, or if you have any questions, local history, genealogy too. We're always excited to go on a hunt to answer a question. We get a lot of really neat questions. So we definitely welcome those. And so this is kind of our last one for this year. And I really appreciate everyone who's attended the sessions. And I know it's been a different year, but I really have appreciated being able to still connect with everyone in this way. So I will see you next year, if not before.